You ever look at an old PS2 game and think, how the hell does this still look that good? I mean, this console came out over 2 decades ago, and somehow, some of its games still go toe-to-toe with modern titles when it comes to style, atmosphere, and just raw visual impact. Today, we're diving into 10 more PlayStation 2 games that didn't just look great for their time, they still hold up. We're talking epic bosses, cinematic cutscenes, insane art direction, and games that make you question how far devs really push that little black box. Before we start the video, a quick question. Has this ever happened to you? You love the game, the story's great, the world is awesome, but then the grind kicks in. Hours and hours just to level up, or that one boss you just can't beat, and eventually, you give up. Even though deep down you really want to see what comes next. So yeah, Xmod is the solution if you're tired of wasting hours just to enjoy your game. It's a platform that supports over 5,000 single-player games, and with it, you can apply mods and cheats with just one click. Want to skip the grind? Get unlimited gold? Health, mana, stamina, weapons, whatever it is, Xmod probably has it. And the best part? You don't need to know anything about modding. Just launch the game, click the mod you want, and that's it. Instant power-up. Everything's in one place. Trainers, cheats, cosmetic mods, visual upgrades, all neatly organized by game and just one click away. You don't have to worry about viruses or getting banned either. It's 100% safe to use with your Steam account and other platforms, as long as you stick to single-player games. And if anything goes wrong, there's live support ready to help you out. And it's even easier to install it. Click the link in the description or in the pinned comment and download Xmod for free. Then launch your game and activate the mod you want. And boom, in 2 clicks, you're playing the way you want to play. Seriously, just by downloading it through my link, you're already helping the channel a lot, even if you're just testing it out. So give it a shot, it's free, and you'll be surprised by how many games, cool features, and awesome mods it already supports. Try it out and let me know in the comments how it went. The moment you step into the world of Shadow of the Colossus, you know you're not playing a typical PS2 game. Everything about it feels massive, quiet, and deeply haunting. It strips away all the noise. No traditional levels, no swarms of enemies, just you, your horse, and 16 giants standing between you and the one thing you're trying to bring back to life. This game pushed the PS2 like almost nothing else. It wasn't just about pretty visuals. It was about scale, about weight, about atmosphere. Each Colossi moves with purpose, reacts to your presence, and feels like a force of nature. And considering the PS2's limitations, the animation quality and detail on these creatures is just absurd. From the way their fur ripples in the wind to the way dust kicks up with every massive step, it's hard to believe this ran on early 2000s hardware. What's even crazier is how the lighting engine pulls everything together. The way sunlight filters through the clouds and hits the ruins or the fur on a colossus. It gives the whole world this surreal, almost dreamlike glow. Shadows stretch naturally as the time of day changes, and even distant mountains feel alive thanks to the subtle haze and atmospheric depth. It's the kind of visual trickery that makes the world feel massive without actually needing to render every detail up close. And the game's empty landscapes aren't laziness, they're intentional. That silence between battles? It builds tension. It gives weight to what you're doing. And by the time you finally bring down a Colossus, the game doesn't celebrate, it mourns. That emotional shift is part of what makes it unforgettable. Back when the PS2 was reaching its final stretch, Kojima Productions dropped something that felt more like a full-blown Hollywood spy thriller than a game. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater wasn't just good. It was a technical beast, a visual marvel, and a bold goodbye to an entire generation of gaming. Set deep in the Cold War era, this game didn't hold back. From the dense jungle environments to the cinematic camera work, everything was meticulously crafted to pull you into the world of Snake. The game didn't rely on flashy effects. It nailed that moody, overcast jungle vibe using smart light placement and subtle shadow work. You could be crawling through grass and suddenly notice how the sunlight filters through tree branches, or how fog slowly rolls in and out depending on the time of day. And the animations? Unreal for the time. Every movement looked smooth and grounded, thanks to an impressive use of motion capture that was way ahead of what most other studios were doing back then. What really made this game shine, though, was how Kojima pushed the PS2 to its absolute limit. You had massive outdoor areas, real-time camouflage mechanics, complex enemy AI, and somehow, it all ran beautifully. No shortcuts, no compromises. Just raw vision executed with precision. On top of all that, the game had a surprisingly deep system for managing your gear and healing items. You weren't just picking up new weapons, you had to customize your camo for different environments, treat injuries individually, and manage stamina to stay sharp in long missions. It made you think before every encounter, like patching up a cut or fixing a broken bone after a rough fight. Even food played a role, with different animals offering different benefits, pushing you to explore and experiment with what you hunted or foraged. It added this layer of survival that made the entire experience feel more grounded and tactical. Even with remasters and a full remake on the way, the original still hits differently. There's something special about what they managed to achieve on that old hardware. When people talk about the PS2 era, they usually mention RPGs or action games first. But let's be real, Ace Combat Zero was in a league of its own. Bandai Namco went all in on this one, delivering an aerial combat experience that still holds up today, not just for how it plays, but for how it looks. The dogfights are intense, cinematic, and surprisingly immersive for a game from that era. Every missile launch, every jet maneuver, every explosion feels like it was pulled straight out of a blockbuster movie. But the way the clouds were rendered back then still blows my mind. You'd be flying through thick layers of atmosphere, watching the sun break through in streaks, casting dynamic shadows over the terrain below. And the lighting during dogfights wasn't just flashy, it gave real depth to the sky. Explosions would light up your cockpit for a split second, then vanish into smoke trails that twisted with the wind. It's no exaggeration to say it captures that Top Gun vibe better than most actual Top Gun games ever did. What really sets Ace Combat Zero apart isn't just the gameplay, though. The atmosphere is razor sharp, the soundtrack hits hard, and the way it blends storytelling with high-speed action gives the whole experience a unique identity within the series. For a lot of fans, this is the peak of the franchise, and honestly, it's easy to see why. Another thing that made the game so addictive was the aircraft upgrade system. You didn't just pick a jet and fly, each mission gave you cash based on performance. And you could invest that into unlocking new planes, better weapons, and different loadouts. Some jets handled better in tight turns, others packed more firepower or speed, and finding the right one for your playstyle felt super satisfying. Even today, firing it up feels like stepping into a jet cockpit and being dropped into the middle of a beautifully chaotic sky war. It's polished, it's powerful, and it's one of the clearest examples of how far developers could go with the PS2 when they really understood the hardware.
Alright, that's it. Fly right into his tail. Watch your six. Remember the fun.
I assume the others arrived here as well.
There's something about Digital Devil Saga that hits different. While most people were busy falling in love with Persona 3 and Persona 4, Atlus was out here taking a massive gamble. They poured a bigger budget into Digital Devil Saga than they did into Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, which is wild considering how iconic Nocturne became over time. But here's the thing, Digital Devil Saga wasn't aiming to be mainstream. It was darker, more narrative-driven, and had a vibe that felt closer to something like a mature sci-fi thriller than a traditional JRPG. The world is gritty, the characters are complex, and the whole devour your enemies to evolve system, brutal and genius. Graphically, it blows Persona 3 and 4 out of the water. The lighting effects, the enemy designs, the animations, they all push the PS2 harder than most games even dared to try. It's one of those rare cases where the visual style holds up even now, not just because of raw power, but because of smart art direction. What's wild is how clean the transformations looked for a PS2 title. Watching characters morph into their demon forms wasn't just a flashy cut. It was smooth and loaded with style. The animation had weight, the textures were sharp, and the whole sequence felt unsettling in the best way. And yeah, it didn't sell gangbusters like Persona. But for those who played it, Digital Devil Saga is unforgettable. With fans now begging for a remaster, especially after Raidu's comeback, it's pretty clear this series still has a loyal following that refuses to let it fade into obscurity. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps way more than you think. And if you're into this kind of nostalgic deep dive, consider subscribing. We've got plenty more coming your way. Thanks for watching and being here. It really means a lot. Out of all the horror games that landed on the PS2, Silent Hill 3 might just be one of the most visually haunting. It's not just the monsters or the fog that get under your skin. It's how detailed everything is, from the gritty textures on the walls to the unsettling lighting that makes even a hallway feel dangerous. You can tell the devs went all in to make this game feel like a nightmare you can't wake up from. While Silent Hill 2 often gets the spotlight, the third entry pushed the series' graphics to another level. Character models were sharper, animations more lifelike, and the world just felt heavier, more corrupted. The game directly ties back to the first Silent Hill, so playing that one first makes everything hit harder here. But even on its own, Silent Hill 3 delivers atmosphere like few games ever have. But what really stands out is how the game used lighting and shadow in ways that were way ahead of their time. It wasn't just about making things look spooky. It was about using contrast, flickering bulbs, and harsh directional light to mess with your perception. Some areas felt claustrophobic, while others tricked you into thinking you saw movement in the dark. It created this constant sense of unease that didn't rely on gore or noise, just smart visual design that played with your imagination. This was a time when horror wasn't about cheap jump scares. It was about dread, about walking into a room and feeling like something's wrong, even if nothing's there. That slow, psychological burn made Silent Hill 3 stand out, and honestly, it still does. Back on the PS2, most games were fighting for realism. But Odin's Sphere didn't care about looking real. It aimed for something timeless. It was a full-on 2D RPG, hand-drawn from top to bottom, and even today, it looks absolutely stunning. Like, you could show this to someone who's never seen it, and they'd probably guess it was a modern indie hit. That's how clean, detailed, and vibrant the art is. This wasn't just surface-level beauty either. The animations were smooth, the character designs were rich with personality, and the entire world felt like a moving painting. Every background was layered with parallax scrolling that gave real depth to the scenes, even though everything was technically 2D. The skies moved separately from the trees, which moved separately from the grass, and it all created this rich, dreamlike illusion of space. Combine that with lighting effects that shifted across the environment as battles raged on, and you had a game that felt alive without needing realism. It was pure visual storytelling, baked into every frame. Magic, war, betrayal. Odin's Sphere packed it all into a side-scrolling format that somehow felt huge and epic. Vanillaware, the studio behind it, carved out a visual identity that still defines them to this day. You play one of 5 characters, each with their own arc, gameplay style, and perspective on the same world-ending war. What made the gameplay even more addictive was the upgrade system tied to both combat and cooking. You'd collect phosons, little energy orbs dropped from enemies, and use them to grow plants that gave you experience or ingredients for meals. It sounds simple, but it created this loop where fighting, farming, and feasting were all part of getting stronger. And the soundtrack just added to the whole fairy tale but deadly atmosphere. Years later, they gave it a remaster for PS4 and PS Vita, with better performance and a few gameplay tweaks. But even the original version on PS2 is impressive. It wasn't just beautiful for its time. It's beautiful, period.
Though the same blood of their father flowed through their veins, the two battled each other.
Let's talk about one of the wildest, most over-the-top action games ever squeezed into a PS2 disc, Devil May Cry 3. This game didn't just push the limits of the hardware, it straight-up drop-kicked them. Back when most games struggled to balance speed and visual fidelity, this one came in swinging with lightning-fast combat, insane enemy variety, and visuals that still hold up surprisingly well. Another thing that made the visuals pop was the way lighting and camera angles were used during combat. Devil May Cry 3 had this dramatic, almost theatrical feel, especially during boss fights. The way shadows played off the environments, or how certain moves triggered dynamic camera shifts, made everything feel bigger than life. Combine that with flashy effects from charged attacks and stylish rank transitions mid-fight, and you had a visual experience that felt constantly alive. What really made Devil May Cry 3 stand out was how smooth everything felt. You could juggle enemies mid-air, swap weapons on the fly, and pull off combos that looked like they were ripped straight out of an anime fight scene. The animation work was also next level for the time. Motion capture was sharp, attacks had weight, and Dante moved with that perfect mix of swagger and brutality. Even with multiple enemies on screen and non-stop action, the frame rate barely flinched. That's not something you saw often back then. Capcom absolutely nailed the optimization, and it shows. This was the last Devil May Cry released on PS2, and honestly, it went out with a bang. Beyond the combat itself, the upgrade system gave you even more control over how you played. You could level up weapons and unlock new moves for each style, whether you preferred flashy aerial combos or up-close brute force. On top of that, you had access to different fighting styles like Trickster, Swordmaster, Gunslinger, and Royal Guard, each with its own set of upgrades. If you're into hack and slash, this is a no-brainer. Every slash, every taunt, every slow-motion finish, it's pure adrenaline from start to finish. When Tekken 5 dropped, it felt like Bandai Namco had something to prove. And they did. This wasn't just a solid entry in the franchise, it was a massive upgrade over Tekken 4 in pretty much every way. Faster, smoother, better looking, and packed with content. It was like they finally figured out how to squeeze every last drop of power out of the PS2, and the result was stunning. The character models looked cleaner, the animations felt way more fluid, and the stages were just gorgeous. You had detailed environments, lighting that actually felt dynamic, and intros that looked like they belonged in a full-blown anime opening. The polish on this game was unreal. Even today, you can boot it up and still get impressed by how crisp it looks. Another thing that really stood out was how well the game used reflections and surface textures. Leather looked like leather, metal had that cold glint, and even sweat effects during matches gave the fighters a gritty, realistic edge. The stages weren't just pretty backdrops either. Some had animated elements, moving parts, or shifting lighting depending on where you were standing. Tekken 5 didn't just look good though, it played like a dream. Tight controls, a massive roster, and arcade-perfect gameplay that made it a go-to for casuals and pros alike. And when Dark Resurrection hit the PS3, adding online play and even more fighters, it felt like Tekken 5 leveled up all over again. They even dropped a PSP version, which honestly looked way better than it had any right to on a handheld. That's the thing, Tekken 5 was one of those rare games that looked incredible, no matter where you played it. It was the kind of title that you'd leave playing on a demo screen just to turn heads.
Yeah. Yeah.
When Final Fantasy X dropped back in 2001, it wasn't just another RPG, it was a full-blown leap into the future. The PS2 was still a baby at that point, barely a year old, and somehow Square Enix managed to squeeze out a game that looked like it belonged on a way more powerful machine. The jump from Final Fantasy IX on the PS1 to this? Massive, like jaw on the floor, massive. Character models were on a whole new level. Facial animations actually showed emotion, The lighting was cinematic, and the environments felt alive in a way that nothing on consoles had pulled off before. One of the wildest things was how they handled water. Whether it was characters swimming, walking through shallow tides, or just chilling in those crystal-clear lakes of Besaid Island, the water looked ridiculously good for the time. You had reflections, movement, and even little particle effects that made it feel natural. Combine that with subtle weather shifts and ambient lighting, and the whole game had this dreamlike softness that pulled you in without you even noticing. And we can't forget about the cutscenes. Watching Sin rise from the ocean, tearing through cities with that massive, otherworldly presence, was absolutely wild. The scale, the camera angles, the music, the destruction, it all felt like something out of a big-budget movie. You could feel the weight of the threat without a single line of dialogue. And all of that came packed in a game that was just getting started on the PS2's hardware. What really made Final Fantasy X stand out was how polished it was right out of the gate. Most early-gen titles feel like warm-ups, like the devs are still figuring things out. But this game came in swinging with confidence, showing off what the new generation was really capable of. It wasn't just about graphics either. The story hit hard, the world building was deep, and the turn-based combat introduced the conditional turn-based battle system, which brought a fresh layer of strategy. You weren't just pressing attack and watching animations, you were planning ahead, swapping party members mid-battle and adapting in real time. It's no wonder so many people still look back at it as one of the greatest RPGs of all time. Genji dropped right at the tail end of the PS2's life, and honestly, it felt like Sony was trying to show off everything the console could do before moving on. The game doesn't get talked about much today, but back then, it looked stunning. We're talking buttery smooth motion capture, rich lighting effects, and some seriously cinematic action. It had that old-school samurai vibe with flashy sword combat and a visual polish way ahead of most games on the system. One thing that really set Genji apart was how clean and sharp its textures looked compared to most late-era PS2 titles. The armor designs were incredibly detailed, with visible engravings and metallic reflections that actually changed depending on the lighting. Even the way cloth moved during fights felt unusually dynamic for the time, giving each swing of the blade extra weight and realism. The environments also looked handcrafted, the animations were tight, and every duel felt like a scene from a high-budget movie. It didn't just look good, it felt good to play. The progression system was also a big part of what kept the combat interesting. As you took down enemies and progressed through missions, you'd collect experience and materials that let you upgrade your weapons and abilities. Each character had their own skill path, and unlocking new moves or improving your gear made a real difference in how fights played out. Some upgrades added extra hits to combos, others boosted your special attacks, and by the end of the game, you could pull off some seriously slick swordplay that felt earned. Genji eventually got a sequel on the PS3, but the franchise quietly disappeared after that. Maybe because Sony shifted its focus to other big samurai hits like Ghost of Tsushima. Still, Genji deserves more credit. It's one of those hidden gems that, if you fire it up today, will still turn heads. Alright, now it's your turn. Which of these PS2 gems blew your mind back in the day? Or maybe there's a hidden classic we didn't mention that you think deserves a shout-out. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear what stuck with you. And hey, if you enjoyed the ride, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and thanks a ton for hanging out till the end.